Here. Excused.
Here. Here.
Here.
The new members are expected, I believe.
She excused? Or-
Excused. They may have had a miscommunication from the clerk's office.
Okay, and Member Baldo also excused?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Are there any changes to the agenda?
Yes, Chair, are some changes. 2 cases will be postponed. The first case being item number 1 under new business, 404 Apodaca Hill, case number 2023-6937 HDRB to July 25th. And then second item under new business, 847 East Palace Avenue, case number 2023-6965 HDRB to the August 8th, 2023 meeting. And then just to note, the last item on the agenda, item number 7, that case has been withdrawn. That's 640 East Palace Avenue.
Thank you. And is that it?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you very much. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as just amended?
Aguilar Medrano moves to approve as amended. Beachside seconds.
Roll call vote, please.
Member Aguilar Medrano,
Yes.
Member Beachside,
Yes.
Member Bienvenue.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you. We have minutes of June 27, 2023. Any changes to these? No? No changes? Is there a motion to approve these minutes?
Beachside moves to approve the minutes from June 27, 2023. Aguilar Medrano seconds.
Roll call vote, please.
Okay, Member Beachside,
Yes.
Member Bienvenue,
Abstain.
Member Aguilar Medrano.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you. We have no findings of fact and conclusions of law at this meeting. Anyone in this building, in this room, wanting to speak at this time in reference to any H board matters that are not related to cases?
Madam Chair,
Yes,
I just,
Attorney Rubelit.
thank you. I just wanted to apologize. We don't have any findings of fact and conclusions of law to approve this week. I was on leave from June 30th through July 10th. While I was on leave, probably about 12 to 15 of them came in from the planners, which I'll be working on over the next couple of weeks. But this week I've been tied up on some other pressing matters. So we are getting them from the planners, and we will have many to review at the next board meeting.
Thank you, Attorney Rubelit, for that. It appears that no one in this audience wishes to comment on any matters regarding H board. What about anyone on Zoom, Heather?
Yes, Ms. Stephanie Benato would like to speak. Ms. Benato, you may be unmute.
Thank you very much, Stephanie Benato. Excuse me. I just believe that, again, you did an illegal vote. 2-0 is not a majority of the members present voting. I think there is an exception when the chair can vote on a procedural matter, so that you would actually have a majority of the members voting. And I just want to point out to you that I did get an email from the city attorney who acknowledges that on reading it, you would think that there has to be a majority of people, that is the members of the quorum, voting on the issue. That is they're all voting the same way. But then she acknowledges that 2 is not a majority of 4. But then she says, oh, but 3 would be a super majority. And Robert's Rules of Order doesn't call for that. But the city of Santa Fe, which is a home rule city and can make stricter rules than Robert's Rules of Order, or in some cases, the state has said both in resolution and ordinance that when a quorum is present, a vote of the majority of the members present will determine the issue. Again, three is a majority of four, three is a majority of five, four is a majority of six, and it's a majority of seven. Generally, supermajorities refer to the whole. They would not refer to a small quorum like this one. And really, three is only 42% of the vote of the seven members, and four is 57% of the vote. So the city actually has decided there needs to be collaboration and consensus, and that either three or four people, depending on the number in the quorum, have to vote. And that means you actually have to agree, or it just doesn't go forward. This is not a bad thing. Not all development needs to be approved. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Stephanie. Anyone else on Zoom?
Yeah, Chair Rios.
Thank you. Any staff communications?
Not at this time, Chair Rios. There will be discussion item at the end.
Thank you. We have nothing under old business and we have 4 cases under new business. And I do need to inform you that if you disagree with the decision that this board renders this evening in reference to any of these cases, you do have the option to appeal to the city council. And that should be done. You have 15 days after the findings and conclusions have been adopted. And also, if anyone from the public wishes to comment on any cases, Melissa, will you help me with a 2-minute limit? Not applicants, but anyone else from the public. Paul, the first case is yours and it's located at 1518 and a half Cerro Gordo. Is the applicant here? The applicants are here. Go ahead, Paul.
Madam Chair, good evening. Good evening, board members. We are reviewing 1518 and a half Cerro Gordo Road this evening. Fifteen and a half 1518 and a half Cerro Gordo Road is a non-contributing structure located in the downtown and east side historic district. 1518 and a half Cerro Gordo Road is a single-family residence listed as a non-contributing to the downtown and east side historic district. The building was established on a 0.22 acre lot as a single-story, 2-bedroom, 1,018 square foot residential home. The building has a vernacular characteristic style of multi-construction components. The structure itself appears to have been a double-wide trailer that was placed on a cinder or masonry block, which can be observed at the ground level. The material in which the structure is constructed out of is consistent with that of a trailer as noted in the flooring, walls, ceiling, and windows. There is some masonry work done to the outside of the structure, which covers the blocks on which it sits on. This view is facing from the southeast and facing the north elevation. Presently today, that carport is no longer there. It had been destroyed throughout the winter and the spring. As well as there is on the eastern addition to this structure, there is some construction material on top of the roof in which they were doing some rehabilitation to the home, and it was red flagged. And at that time, they applied for a permit and through this application process. Here's a view from the north facing to the east, showing the structure. And in this view on the northern facade, on the base level, you can see some concrete construction, and that construction is kind of concealing the structure's placement on top of masonry block. Here's an overview facing to the north, showing the southern facade and the addition. Here's the southern facade facing to the west. Here's the eastern facade facing towards the north. Here's a site plan showing on the proposed site plan on the right-hand side, showing where the construction of a 4-foot, no greater than a 4-foot tall concrete wall on the western edge of the structure, as well as on the roof. You can see on the clear story on the southern edge, the lighting, clear lighting. Here's the floor plan, and in this floor plan, starting on the northeastern part of the structure, they want to establish an office space where the carport used to be. In addition, they want to extend on the bedroom to the north as well. And in that, they're looking at, the applicant proposes the following exterior alterations. They're proposing to enlarge the existing bedroom 75 square feet on the northeast facade. They would like to repair the roof over the existing carport and bedroom and throughout the entire home. They would like to enclose the carport to create an office, storage, and mechanical space. They propose to repair the entire roof and raise the existing pitch roof and create a clear story. They would like to install two 2x4 skylights where the clear story is added. Construct a 228 square foot portal, natural stain and middle roof. Install new gutters and downspouts. Remove and replace exterior windows with divided light windows and wooden middle clad doors. Restucco the entire structure with Stowe elastomeric stucco and paint with El Rey color adobe. Construct and stucco the new exterior 4-foot courtyard wall and install a drainage pond to accommodate new portal and bedroom extension. Here on the north elevation, we can see where they want to install a new wooden middle clad door with divided light. Above, you can see in the clear story, they're looking to add divided light windows as well. On the east elevation, they're looking to extend that carport and close it and make it an office space. In doing so, they look to install divided light windows, as well as on the clear story, you can see the skylights. Apologize. On the south elevation, they look at to install the wooden middle clad doors with divided light, pitch the roof, add skylights above, and on the concrete stucco wall, extend that on the western edge of that the southwestern edge of the structure, extending it out and around on the western facade. And we can see the portal as well. Here on the western elevation, we can see on the right-hand side, we can see the construction of the CMU concrete wall extending to the portal. The portal wraps around to the northern elevation, northern facade, and on the office space that will be constructed, there is French doors that will be established with divided light windows. And we can see also the clear story pitch on the roof. The color that they're looking at painting the stucco on the CMU wall and on the structure is the adobe circled there. Staff recommends approval of the proposed project and finds that the application complies with with section 14-5.2D General Design Standards for all historic districts, 14-5.2E Downtown and East Side Design Standards. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Before we go into the case, I would like to welcome a new member that just joined us, and that is Amanda Mathers. Welcome. And we are in the middle of the first case this evening, and that's located at 1518 and a half Cedar Grove. So Paul, this is definitely a double wide trailer that has been stuccoed over. Is that correct?
Madam Chair, I believe so. It has all of the structural integrity as a double wide trailer.
Any other clarification questions for Paul at this time? Member Beachside?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Paul, was an allowable height calculation done for this property?
For this property, Madam Chair, Member Beachside, for this property in the code, it states no higher than 16 feet.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Member Aguilar Madral?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Paul, do you know, so when looking at the east and the west elevation, there appears to be some sort of vent that's extremely tall. Do you know, is there a reason that it needs to be that tall, or have there been any conversations about that?
Madam Chair, Member Aguilar Medrano, I would defer to the applicant.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I guess I could also ask the applicant this question. Skylights are proposed. Are they going to be publicly visible?
Madam Chair, I believe they will be publicly visible on the north facade.
And do you know if they're low profile or are they not low profile?
Madam Chair, they look to be a low profile rectangular shape.
Thank you. And I suppose I can re-ask the question. Anything else? Member Benvenu?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Following up on our discussion on site today, I was wondering about the shed style roof for the clear story roofing. We had a robust discussion 2 meetings ago about shed roofs, whether they're allowed or not in this district. And I think staff's opinion was no, unless specific requirements are met about the 50% in the streetscape. How do you address that in the context of this application?
Madam Chair, Member Bienvenue, after reviewing the code for the non-contributing structure, 16 feet was a height limit, but there was nothing stating that they could not build the clear story shed style.
Okay, well, let's come back and maybe Heather can address this, because this was the discussion we had last time as to whether or not the specific provision in that applies to all districts calculating when shed roofs are allowed, pitched roofs in general, controls over the more specific requirements within each district. And in that case, it was Westside Guadalupe. And I thought staff's view was that the general prohibition of shed roofs applied even if it was not specifically called out in an individual district. Am I wrong?
Madam Chair, Member Bienvenue, I believe the context of that conversation really had to do with the height of that structure and the streetscape. And so in the streetscape, there are shed roofs. I mean, it's central. It's not exactly right on Cerro Gordo. So the streetscape is considered a circle within 300 feet as the radius. And so for that reason, there's a variety of roof types in that area. I think the focus of our conversation was clear story windows more than the shed roof. Did I
last time?
misunderstand?
The last time, did you mean, or today?
Today.
No, I'm focused on the shed roof. I mean, to me, clear story, all that refers to is the fact there's a bank of windows on the wall, eye on the wall. It doesn't mean there has to be a shed roof, right? You could
That is
have, you
correct.
could have any style of roof over a clear story. In
Correct.
this particular case, they've chosen a shed roof. And I thought we reached a clear understanding last time with respect to the property on Maynard Street, that staff's view was that proposed gable roof in that case had to meet specific standards. Otherwise, it wasn't good enough. In other words, that the definition of the West Side Guadalupe streetscape already, or style already permitted that style of roof. You felt that you still needed to look at the streetscape standards in order to decide. But the streetscape standards in this case say you can only have pitched roofs if there are 50% or more of them in the applicable streetscape. So it seems to me we have a disconnect.
Yes, Madam Chair, Member Bienvenue, I will double check, but there are quite a few pitched roofs. Also, just referring back to the downtown and east side historic district. So there's discussion about flat roofs. The rule as to flat roofs shall not be construed to prevent the construction of skylights and so on. And so with recent Santa Fe style, there's also, accommodation for shed roof, and that's what would be this particular case. But I will double check while we're going through this case on the number of pitched roofs and shed roofs in the streetscape.
Okay. Right. I can't quite see which specific provision it is. It's 14-5.2 D something, and then D for pitch. And the sentence I'm focused on is if the determined streetscape includes over 50% buildings with pitched roofs, the proposed building may have a pitched roof.
Chair Rios, yes, Member Bienvenue, I will take a look at that.
So that-
Member Aguilar Madrano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One question, Paul, I forgot to ask you. Which facades are publicly visible?
Madam Chair, Member Aguilar Majano, it would be the north facade and the west facade.
Okay, thank you, Paul.
Yes, ma'am.
There are no further questions. Will the applicant or applicants please come forward to get sworn in?
I'll need to swear you in. Will you both be speaking or just you?
Lean on.
Okay, so let me swear you in as well. Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimonies you're about to give are the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. And when you speak, please state your name and address for the record. Thank you.
My name is Tamara Acker and the address is 1518.5 Cerro Gordo Road.
Ryan R.L. Allen, 2395, Ventura, Santa Fe, New Mexico, 8750.
I will ask you to please speak right into that mic because so that the recorder can pick you up and so that we can all hear. Thank you. Yes, board members, did you have anything in particular that you wish to state about the project?
We agree with the finding, excuse me, we agree with the findings of the staff and we entertain any questions that you guys keep. Thank you.
Board members, do you have questions for the applicant? Member Benvenue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I'll just ask what Madeline had asked before. What about this, the stovepipe? What is the purpose? I assume it's to get above the clear story shed roof, but
That's right. So in the code, if you have a chimney, a stack, it needs to be, if there's any element that's within 10 feet, that stack element needs to be 24 inches above the closest item. So that's why it looks like that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can I just ask a follow-on question of staff regarding that? Does that factor into the allowable height? Because that would be approximately 17 feet if that exceeds the allowable height of 16.
Chair Rios, Member Beachite, the overall height calculation is based on an average of all four facades. And so there are certain pieces that might be higher, but then the grade, as you can see here, is, you know, causes the building to be lower in height. So you're taking over an overall average, it would be approximately within that 16 feet.
Okay, thank you.
And what is the total square footage of this home?
I think it's on the, it may be on the cover. I don't know if the cover's here, but I think it was.
Paul, maybe Paul can answer that.
The total Madam Chair, the total square footage of this home is 1,018 square feet. The proposed,
That's what I'm talking about with the proposal. And while you're looking for that, I will ask the question if the skylights are low profile.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the proposed square footage of this home would be 1,746 square feet.
Board members, any other questions? Member Benvenu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So following up on the pitched roof issue, as long as, while staff is still reviewing that as to whether or not it's allowed. Obviously, you could still have clear story windows if that's your goal with a parapet, a flat roof and a parapet, which would also hide the skylights from Cerro Gordo Road. Is that something you've considered?
Actually, oh, sorry. Actually, the consideration was for a more traditional pitch. If this one, for any reason, you know, did not meet your, you know, statutes. However, we did go in this direction because the Upaya Center that is, you know, joins in a lot of ways the property does have a chaplaincy house that has the exact same design. So I took from that, I actually borrowed from that because they're my closest neighbor on the, let's see, that
South
would be
side.
the south side of the property. So I thought, oh, you know, there it is. Otherwise the copper roofed homes that are, also my neighbor on the, that would be the east side, was also contemplated because of the traditional style. I thought it would lend itself to the structure very nicely.
Mhm. So describe for me that latter one again, that latter proposal or possibility.
It would be a pitched roof and it would also have a copper,
Oh, with copper, I see.
and just go with looking very similar to that, that structure.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair,
Attorney Brubili.
if I may, I think this may be a good time to describe an item under general design standards for all H districts, which is found at subsection D of 14-5.2. Subsection 6 under D reads that existing roof styles and materials shall be maintained or replaced in kind if necessary. The addition of dormers or other roof features should only be considered when they are an existing or historical feature of the structure. So as I see the diagrams, specifically the west, I believe it is the existing west elevation, comparing that to the proposed west elevation. The fact that this building already has a pitched or shed roof may may control over subsection D. D9 D, which reads if the determined streetscape includes over 50% buildings with pitched roof, the proposed building may have a pitched roof. I think the fact that this building already has a pitched or shed roof is what allows shed roof. You can tell me if you disagree.
Disagree.
Okay, well, that
As that provision applies to contributing and significant structures.
the provision I just read regarding roof styles.
Yeah.
And I don't see the same language that I see in other subsections under subsection D, subsections under subsection D that make it clear that there's a distinction between contributing significant or non-contributing.
All of paragraph D applies to structures that have been declared significant or contributing.
Well, in response to that, this issue has come up before under subsection E3. It reads, except where this chapter provides for staff review, the Historic District Review Board shall review all applications for new construction, alteration, or demolition in the historic districts and of landmark structures throughout the city. And then subsection 4 reads, all development located within the historic district and subject to subsection 14-5.2 shall comply with all applicable general development standards set forth in subsection 14-5.2D. So at least according to C4, everything has to comply with subsection 14-5.2D. And I believe that there are special protections for contributing and significant structures that are spelled out in the specific language of the various subsections under D. But I read
Oh, I
that
understand.
D applies to everything. So, and this question has come up before, and it's one of the anomalies in the code that I'd kind of hope the Clarion and Associates can fix. That's my interpretation.
But in the meantime, we have to deal with what we do have in the code. And obviously, there's some different interpretations. Yes, Heather.
Chair Rios, member Bienvenue, I did some analysis and there are 6 pitched roof buildings in that streetscape with a total of 11 buildings within the 300-foot, 600-foot diameter, 300-foot radius.
Problem solved.
Member Aguilar Madonna.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Another quick clarification from staff. On the west elevation, which is publicly visible, there's a window that sits right at the corner, so it doesn't meet that 3-foot minimum requirement. I don't believe the fact that it's under a portal precludes it from that rule. Am I understanding that correctly? That this window would also need to be 3 feet from the corner?
Madam Chair, member Aguilar Madrona, that is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Did you wish to comment on that, applicant?
Yeah, that window is for a shower. It's specifically designed for privacy for that, and up high for the shower.
Yeah, the height's not the problem. In the code, it says on a publicly visible facade that there has to be a minimum of 3 feet between the corner and the start of the window. So that's the issue, not the height.
Then I would just add that it's not public, this particular property sits in a hole far below the actual street, and the public cannot see this house at all.
Paul, would you mind commenting on that? Since you'd said that the west elevation was publicly visible in the north?
Madam Chair, Member Aguilar Madrano, when you drive on Cerro Gordo, you can see the northern elevation and the western elevation.
The entire elevation, so you would see this corner?
You would be able to see this corner. That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Member Bichotti.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Maybe could we bring up wasn't there a photograph from Cerro Gordo of the property? I think it's mostly viewed from above. That would be taken from Cerro Gordo, is that right? And could you point out on the photograph where the proposed portal and window are?
See that?
Right, that corner, and the portal would be over that. So I don't know if staff might have an interpretation of the rule with respect to the view from the street and the portal extending over that window, if that's still considered publicly visible or not.
And just so you guys know, that is an actual easement for a driveway. If you were to take it, if you were to walk on Cerro Gordo, you can't see it. So there's properties that frontage that. There's an easement to get to this one.
Thank you. I have just a question about the tall vent pipe. If I'm understanding your description of the code requirements, if the fireplace was moved, that pipe could be lower. So if it was further away from your clear story roofing, could it be lower? And is that an option? Did you consider a different placement for the fireplace?
I think we would have to eliminate the fireplace to meet the code.
I'm sorry, I don't really understand what the code requirement is, that you have to have 2 feet above the highest point within
10 feet.
10 feet. Okay, thank you.
Anything further, board members? Anyone from the public wishing to speak on this project? Anyone on Zoom?
Yes, Madam Chair, Stephanie Benato would like to speak. Stephanie, please state your name and address for the record and be prepared to be sworn in.
Okay, Stephanie Benato, PO Box 1601, Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. And Stephanie, if you could please speak a little louder and closer to the mic. Thank you.
Okay, can you hear me now? Is that better? Hello?
Yes, that's better. Thank you.
Okay. So you're going to swear me in?
I thought I just swore you in. Do you swear under the penalty of perjury?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry, you did. I remember now. I'm sorry. Excuse me. So I just have to say that I don't think buildings themselves have agency. And so when things get described, like the carport just came down over the winter and spring or whatever, to me, that means that somebody demolished it without getting a permit. And I just feel like, we might as well be upfront about those kinds of things if in fact that's what happened. I too would like to see that window set back from the corner. I don't think the portal should matter because the portal could get removed at some point. And I also am concerned about the height of the stovepipe. Thank you.
Yes, Paul.
Madam Chair, board members, may I present, our manager, Gary Mokino, showed me a view from the streetscape. It's possible that I can show you somehow what it looks like directly from the streetscape. That way you'll have a better idea.
Sure, please do.
He's going to put that on the Elmo.
Madam Chair, Gary Mokino showed me a picture from the streetscape. And from that streetscape, you can only see the lining of the rooftop. You cannot see the structure itself. And
Chair, are you guys looking at Google Earth and driving the street there?
Pardon me?
Yeah, Madam Chair, you guys driving Google Earth, look at the street. Yeah,
Yes, that's what she's doing.
I think that would be the best way.
Madam Chair, if the PowerPoint can be switched to the Zoom, I have the Google Maps up. And so this is, you're proceeding on Cerro Gordo Road. This is the access drive. It parallels Cerro Gordo quite a ways down to the site. So to get a view of the house, continue on. Oops, is that too far? Get the house just a little bit more. This is the roof of the house itself from Cerro Gordo Road. Right here. Can you see my hand?
Yes.
Can you back up to the driveway? Look down the driveway at the structure.
Can't go down the
No,
driveway.
right.
And that driveway is considered a public way, correct? Heather? That driveway is a public way because it's used by the residences of that area, correct?
Madam Chair, I would have to check to see if it's an easement, but it is not a public street. So it functions more as a driveway to those homes, but I can see if it's a public easement.
Might survey, it's an easement for just those 3 houses.
Board members, any other questions? Are we still waiting for this?
Are we ready for a motion?
We're ready to make a motion.
I'll make a motion in this case, in case number 2023 006970 HDRB at 1518 and a half Cerro Gordo Road. I move that we approve the application as recommended by staff, noting that the streetscape in which this property sits meets or exceeds the 50% of pitched roofs in the streetscape, and that the pitched roof is allowed for this building, and that the windows on the west facade and north facade are not visible from Cerro Gordo Road and are therefore allowed to be closer than 3 feet to the corner.
So second to this motion.
Second.
Is there anything further to add? If not, may we have a roll call vote, please?
Member Bienvenue,
Yes.
Member Mather,
Yes.
Member Aguilar Madrano,
Yes.
Member Beachside.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Madam
Next
Chair.
case is Ramon's case. It's located at 578 West San Francisco Street and is the applicant here for that case. The applicant is here.
Good evening, Chair Rios and members of the board. Before I begin my cases, I'd like to share a few thoughts. Okay. with you. First, congratulations to my colleague Paul Duran and his wife Danielle, recently married this weekend. And bienvenidos, welcome to the board, Member Mathers, and if you're watching, David Valdo as well. I'm also relatively new to the historic board. And I'm learning more about our mission and its code and importance every day. Thanks greatly to the board, my experienced staff, concerned constituents also. What I did not realize until recently was the extent to which the online community was paying attention to the matters before the board. I encountered an old friend of mine, Miss Patty Dexter, who commented that she had viewed a hearing where I presented several cases and said I was doing good. I'd like to thank Miss Dexter for the encouraging words and thank you all that are paying attention to our history and built environment. Matter at hand. This is case 2023006955 578 West San Francisco Street, West Guadalupe Historic District. The request is for a status downgrade from contributing to non-contributing for the main residence located at 578. This is the location of the property. It sits on the south side of West San Francisco Street and just east of Candelaria Street. A fire had occurred in the main residence, which did extensive damage to the interior of the structure prior to 2017. In 2017, the applicant had a status review where the status of the main structure was retained as contributing, with the north and west facades designated as primary. And the guest house was non-contributing. The applicant obtained a permit in 2021 to begin the approved renovation. The permit expired in May of this year. During the renovation, the roof of the main residence was removed. Without the roof, the walls began to crumble and deteriorate. Only portions of the walls remain standing. Minimum maintenance standards for historic buildings are cited in section 14-5.2B. The property was a single-family residence, was constructed in Spanish Pueblo revival style in the 1940s. The building featured rounded parapets and corners, and the northwest corner portal with carved corbels, exposed headers, and a square post. The windows at that time, windows and doors at that time was not considered historic. This is a photo from the HICP, the Historical Cultural Properties Inventory Form from 1996. And this is the previously approved elevation. This is the north elevation. The previously approved east elevation. The previously approved south elevation. This is the west elevation, which was also considered primary from that same 96 report. And a drawing again of that west elevation. These are photographs of the north and west elevations after the fire, but prior to removal of the roof. South elevation after the fire on the upper left-hand corner, but prior to the removal of the roof, and the east elevation prior to the removal of the roof on the lower right. This is the current conditions of the house. Above, you can see the south remaining walls. And below to the right, you can see the east remaining. Due to the lack of the original structure, the applicant requests a downgrade of the status of contributing to non-contributing. Staff recommends the historic status of the structure be maintained as contributing per 14-5.2C designation of significant and contributing structures. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Yes, Member Beachlight?
First of all, I have a question about the noticing. This case was noticed as a demolition, but is apparently just a status downgrade.
Correct.
Is there any issue with the notification that was posted?
In order to proceed with the demolition, it was important to determine the status of the building. So do you have anything to add to that, Heather?
Chair Rios, Member Beachside, there still is effective notice that's being provided. The staff determined that the status downgrade should be determined first before any demolition. Originally, they were proposed to be on the same agenda.
Got it. That makes sense. Thank you. I guess so many questions about why this is now, I mean, it's so unfortunate that it's in the state it's in now, but there's hardly anything left. And we certainly couldn't designate a primary facade at this point. Can you share more about your recommendation that this be maintained as contributing?
The primary facades had been previously designated as the north and the west. I'd like to phone a friend on this question.
Chair Rios, Member Beachside, the reason for retaining the contributing status primarily is due to the fact that this was an adobe structure. And as such, certainly there are provisions for rebuilding a building that has been damaged. And so as such, thinking forward to maintain that historic status or character, then it would have to be built exactly in like kind instead of using more modern technology, what typically is expected as a frame wall, which doesn't have the depth.
Member Benvenu?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have questions for the applicant that I think could probably more appropriately address sort of the history of how we got here today. But Ramon, you did mention in your staff report that there was correspondence between the division and the owner about the requirement that this property be maintained. Can you expand upon what kind of back and forth you had in that regard?
Well, this is information that was gleaned from the previous HDRB case, which I wasn't a part of, determining its status and primary elevations. So I probably should have not included that in my staff report, because I'm not familiar with those correspondence exactly.
Okay.
Chair.
So are you saying, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Heather.
Thank you. Chair Rios, Member Bienvenue, with reference to the correspondence, our previous HPD manager, Carly Picarillo, has had a lot of correspondence. It was stated that the applicant removed the windows and then the structure fell down. And there was concern about that case. And in addition, the Ms. Picarella requested that the structure be preserved until the board could act on that issue. And there's been no substantive efforts to preserve what was left.
Do you know whether any permission was granted by the city to remove all the material that no longer is there on site?
Chair Rios, member Bienvenu, I do not believe so, but I can double check our permitting system.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that. I'll address my other questions to the applicant.
Ramon, is the wall still existing? And is it part of this application?
The portions of the wall that are existing have been determined as structurally unstable. And there's just a few remaining portions of,
And that is because were they part of the fire? Did I hit the wall as well? Or
I will let the applicant answer that.
any other questions or comments, board members? Not at this time. Okay, applicant, yes. Gary.
Chair Rios and member Benvenu, we had a meeting on site and we talked about it, and there is no approval of the windows to be removed before the adobes have found.
Thank you.
Meetings on it. So
Thank you. Mr. Mokino. Okay, if you will swear in the applicant, please.
You swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? And can you please state your name and address for the record?
Gregory Escusa, and I'm at 19 Pueblo Garcia Road.
Okay. Good evening, Mr. Escusa.
evening.
Yes, Escusa, can you tell us a little bit more about this project from your view?
Yes, ma'am. So when I got approved, we started doing the guttering it down, all the demolition. And I was following everything but the drawings, the plans. And we did get approved to, the roof was no good. Nothing was good at all in that house. And we took off the roof and the parapet started coming down. So as soon as we started taking off the plaster, because that's what it said on the plans. Get rid of the old plaster, mesh it, wire it, replaster it. We started taking off the plaster and everything started coming down. All the adobe started disintegrating. So I thought as soon as we take off the window headers, which I had to take off in the windows too, I don't know, I just heard Mr. Mokino said that I didn't have permission to take off the windows. We had to take up the windows. Everything was going to be replaced, brand new, with the windows that met your guys' requirements or statutes. So anyways, I went myself I came to the city hall to talk to any inspector because I didn't know at that point what to do. And I thought as soon as I took up the window headers, I'm going to lose more adobe. So I came in Mr. Name is Robert Ortiz. He directed me to Bobby Padilla. So Mr. Padilla gave me a card to one of his field inspectors. I called him the next morning. We met there and I showed him what was going on. And I told him his name's Greg Martinez, I believe. So he told me, this is what it is. If it falls down, put it back up, respect the elevations, don't get in trouble. And that's what happened. 2 days later, Mr. Mokino showed up and red tagged us and here we are. But I mean, that west side of the wall that fell down, it just, as soon as we took up the window header, like I said, it came down. And that's the story. But I mean, all the adobe there is no good. It's disintegrating. Even the footers are cracked. That's not safe for my family at all.
Questions, comments? Member Bienvenu?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So yeah, let's just flesh this out a little bit because I'm just trying to figure out how we got from 2021 when you have a building permit and there's a full house standing there to 2023 where there's barely anything on the property
Correct.
left. I mean, that's a very dramatic alteration that it looks like a huge amount of material was taken off the site. Right? I mean, you took the roof off, I guess,
The
with
roof-
permission, but then like literally everything else except for a few adobes that are left standing are all gone. And you didn't have permission to take all that away, did you? Because that's virtually a complete demolition.
Well, the roof wasn't, nothing was good in that house. I mean, the stucco I had to get rid of. As soon as I got rid of the stucco and the roof, everything started coming down on its own. It's not that we went and got rid of the walls.
When you say it came down on its own, so you take the roof off and then you're saying a week later?
No,
the
the
walls
same
came
day
in?
it started disintegrating all the adobe. That's why I came to the city hall to talk to somebody. I needed to show someone what was going on. I did not want to get in trouble. That's the last thing I wanted to happen. And I mean, they directed me to the city inspectors, not the historic inspectors. If I would have known, like I told them, I'm sorry, this is the first time I deal with the historic district, project. If I would have known, I would have came to you guys instead.
But I think you said that he said respect the elevations,
Correct.
but the elevations are pretty much gone now. Right?
Because the wall came down. I mean, he said, if it falls down, put it back up, respect the elevations. put it
And
back.
and when you say it fell down, you're saying you just came to the site
just
the next
came
day and it
down.
was
It's-
all on the ground?
Yeah, but
Did you take photos or anything? Any documentation of that?
I sent them to Greg Martinez, yeah, all the photos. You guys,
Okay.
I believe you guys have them.
Do you have them? Do you have any?
Not today.
Okay. And what about the structure that was in the back? There was a garage and a guest house. It also seems to be gone. Did you have a demolition
That
permit?
was a half frame and half adobe.
Right.
So when I spoke to Greg Martinez, that's the first part. I took him to the back and I showed him, because we didn't know what was behind the walls. So when we started taking off the plaster inside, we came to find out that the east side of the wall was frame. And the west side of the house was also frame. And all the frame was rotted at that point. I mean, the house was built in 1935, I believe, 1939, something like that.
You're talking about the guest house now.
Both of them, yeah, but
I'm
yeah,
focused now on the garage.
Correct, yeah.
/ guest house in the back.
Yeah, so all the frame was rotted. It was all rotted out, black, moldy and stuff. And I told him, Greg, I don't have permission to get rid of it. What do I do? But I can't T-rock over this frame. And he pulled out the tape measure. He started, measuring the setback, and he said he didn't know what to do. He said, take it down, put it back up just the same way it is. We can bring him if you want. That's
Who is it that said that?
Greg Martinez. He's a inspector for
Oh.
here for the city.
Okay. Because did you have a building permit to be working on that building at all?
Yes.
Was that also, because I didn't see that being approved?
Yeah, I was for both.
There were plans that were approved for renovation of that building?
Correct.
Okay. But then you ended up doing a complete demolition?
No, well, we had to get rid of that wall. It was rotted out.
Right, but I mean, there's literally nothing left.
Yeah, we're gonna put it back
It's
up,
out.
but then that's when I got rid of tagged, and I didn't keep going. I didn't do nothing.
Okay.
I mean, I could have, the back casita is not contributing, so I could have kept on going with the back one, but I decided to stop till.
Actually, no. Even if it's not contributing, you still need to have proper city
No,
approvals.
they gave me permission to.
And you can't do a demolition in the historic district without approval. Anyway, okay, the reason, just for the benefit, sort of advanced preview of the issue here is, I think one of the questions in my mind is whether or not the provision of 14-5.2, I think it's C2F, restoration of status applies here. Because that provision provides that if an owner makes any changes, I think, to a structure without city approval that's in the historic district, then that results in a downgrade, then they can be required to restore it as it was. And I think we're hearing that quite a bit of this was done without city approval, so that may be one avenue that the board could take, even if the property is downgraded. Thank you.
I think Mr. Mokino wanted to say something.
Yes, Chair Rios and Member Benvenu, the detached building in the back is still in compliance, so we had an agreement on that he could still work on the back garage area, so it's just the main residence that we were concerned of, but the back garage is still in compliance, so you can still work on it.
So the back building you indicated did have a permit?
Correct, everything's
Okay.
approved for the back
Okay.
end, for that, it's still good to go. Exactly, yes, and we talked about it with former manager Picarillo, and we agreed that he can still work on it and work on that piece of property, except for the main residence.
Okay. My comments were primarily directed at the main residence, just to be clear. Thank you.
Member Aguilar? Donna?
Question and then a comment. The stone yard wall, is that still there? I didn't see it in the photographs.
It is, yeah, still up, and it's gonna be, yeah, it's the same.
And that one's in fair condition today?
Yes, it is, except the gate. I'm gonna replace it.
Okay. And then my thoughts, yeah, I see that we have two avenues this evening, either what member Bienvenu just mentioned, or the other one could be that even if the status is maintained, I believe that you could still come back and request an exception to demolish it. But then you'd be required to rebuild it, I believe, with the same materials and to look the same. So I'm wondering, do you have any opposition in terms of a new building? Are you wanting it to look different? Are you wanting to use different materials? What is your main reason for wanting to downgrade the status?
Well, because since whatever's left, it's not really safe,
Sure.
or reinforce it.
Mhm.
I wanted to start all over fresh, and then because the main thing that the footings aren't safe, they're cracked. So I wanted to, build it all new and with a frame if possible.
Okay, so
And
frame would be your preferred
Frame,
method.
but like leave it like Adobe kind of, the stucco, leave it like if it was Adobe, my neighbor next door on 576 West San Francisco, I believe, he showed me his house and it's part frame. And it's got round corners and stuff and it looks exactly like Adobe.
Heather, am I correct in that? Let's say we upheld the status this evening. The applicant could come back, request demolition, which means you would get to start from scratch to make sure everything is stable and safe, but he would be required to match the prior building in material and form. Am I understanding that right?
Chair Rios, member Aguilar Medrano, that is correct.
Okay. Are you willing to construct a brand new structure out of Adobe if that's the direction the board took?
Rather do wood, but I mean, if I don't have an option, then
Is your preference cost related, or can you elaborate a little bit more on why you prefer frame construction?
well, it is a little more expensive, the Adobe, and plus it's more insulated if we do, you guys allowed me to do the frame. It'll be better insulated and probably in less cost.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Anyone from the audience wishing to comment? Mr. Rash, come forward and get some.
Hi, David. Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Please state your name and address.
David Rash, 21 Altora Road, Santa Fe. You know, I think at this point, since there was already a status review when I was the planner with this property as my case, we did a status review to determine it was a contributing building with 2 primary elevations. And the approval would have maintained that status with the amount of excessive work, but it was still maintaining its status. And that's because the same materials were being used. Just like the fire damaged property on Palace across from La Posada, I find it very difficult if you're going to rebuild a building, even using modern materials of the same type, like stabilized adobes, replacing historic adobes. I have a hard time believing that that is still listed as a historic contributing structure. But certainly if you're going to allow rebuilding with frame, that is no longer a contributing building. That would downgrade its status to not replace it in kind. And since this structure was during construction, it could be considered demolition by neglect, because if you're working on a historic adobe, you should know you need to shore up the walls before you take the roof off. So there's proper procedures that need to be followed when working on a historic contributing adobe structure. The non-contributing building in the back, that's not my concern, but I was the case planner for this project. And I think if you're going to allow reconstruction in order to maintain the contributing status, it must be in-kind materials. I don't remember if the windows were wood or metal. So even if they were steel casements, in the past, you've allowed aluminum modern windows, metal for metal. But that's the only way to maintain that status. If you allow any other change of materials, especially walls, I would not say that's maintaining contributing status and requires a downgrade. And for an exception to downgrade a contributing building, this board must find that every one of the criteria is met in order to approve the exception. You can't just say it's met. You have to say why each one is met. And I don't think you should do a status review. It already had its status review, and you can't do that now because it's already in that process. Thank you.
David, before you leave, so it is your position that, okay, this building had a contributing status. Now there's nothing remaining of the building, some little stubs of adobe. So it is your position. I heard you say that this cannot be reviewed because it was already reviewed, but that is what is before the board this evening.
It's really, Madam Chair, I really believe it's too late to take what exists of this structure and review its status, because that was already done when it was more intact. Now that it's in process, it's during permit, you're allowing reconstruction during permit. So that's approved. But what we don't know, because we're lacking photographs, was there demolition by neglect? Can you consider not shoring historic adobe walls up before taking a roof off as demolition by neglect? I think our historic inspector would, because that's clear. That's how you need to treat. If you own a contributing historic adobe, that's the required treatment. You can't just take the roof off and pray that the wall won't fall down. So that is demolition by neglect, but it was the contractor's neglect, not necessarily allowing something to rot. But while you're remodeling a contributing historic building, you need to maintain as much material as possible. You need to take all precautions.
But in my mind, I'm having a difficult time, even though I don't vote, but as my comments, I'm having a difficult time reconciling that this would be a contributing building when there is nothing left.
But look what we did on Palace Avenue. It was a total reconstruction. It's still listed as a contributing building. That's my personal and professional dilemma. I don't think the Palace Avenue building should be listed as contributing. It's totally new material. Even if it still looks like the historic building, there's no historic material.
Well, then you're saying that this building shouldn't be contributing.
This is the problem. I don't think I've ever had a case where during construction that much has come down and then they've taken away more. But I think the way to go is not a status review, it's an exception. And that's how it's listed. I had a problem with allowing something to come forward as a status review when it's listed as an exception for demolition. That's not properly noticed, in my opinion.
Now, I see here that it says request to demolish a contributing structure. an exception is requested,
I would.
but I don't think
expect-
that is the route that we are taking this evening.
Yeah, I would expect you need to notice that a historic status is going to be addressed. How I did it for 15 years. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Any thoughts, board members? Any? I don't know. I mean, we're here for a status review. I personally find it difficult when there's, what are we reviewing? There's rubble. Really.
I'll make a comment. Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I mean, I think everyone's facing the same conundrum in this particular case because this is a situation where you have a contributing building that the only reason it is now not standing as a historically viable building at this point in time is because of the owner's own actions that caused it to fall down. So there's a high reluctance to want to reward that or even acknowledge it by calling that calling the result of that an automatic downgrade. Because I know there are a lot of properties. I can think of one up on Upper Canyon Road where I think the owner is deliberately attempting to downgrade the property through neglect. And that's a very dangerous precedent to set if that can be done when someone wants to get rid of a building and build something new on site. So I tend to agree with staff in this particular case that the safe course of action is to say the only reason we're even considering a revision of the status is because of the owner's own actions. The code specifically provides that owners are required to maintain their property. In this particular case, that did not take place. And I think that the historic integrity that existed before in some philosophical sense has to be continued to be ongoing, I think, in this particular case, because otherwise we would be acknowledging the owner's own actions. So my view is that the appropriate course of action would be to maintain the contributing status.
Any other positions? And anybody else wants to express at this time? Member Beachside?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, that makes sense to me too, that we move forward with what is certainly going to be a demolition of a contributing structure by exception. Yeah, we shouldn't be making this process sort of routine where we just downgrade things that aren't maintained. Yes, I guess if we have to determine status today, I would be in favor of keeping it contributing, although it makes like zero sense to me.
Member Aguilar? Joanna?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm torn, the same as everyone else, for the very reason Member Bienvenue stated that, we're very hesitant to set that precedent. In my mind, I think, if an owner is neglecting a building, that I think should fall more on the city. I don't know if that's a process of finding the owner, but I have a really hard time maintaining, considering the structure or contributing at this point. And I think we will ultimately go the route of, if we maintain it's contributing, it's going to come back for demolition. And then if we approved it, then that's also a precedent. We added one more step I don't know. So people think that if they neglect their house, even if it gets maintained as contributing, they know they can come back for demolition approval. So I think this evening, I lean towards downgrading it. I just can't see that there's enough there to maintain it as contributing. And I don't think rebuilding it, regardless of materials, like Mr. Rash said, I'd be comfortable considering that an authentic contributing building any longer.
Applicant, did you have any comments at this time?
No, not at all. It's board members' decision.
Thank you. Anyone from the public in this room wishing to speak in reference to this particular project? Anyone on Zoom?
Yes, Chair Rios, Stephanie Benato would like to speak.
Yes, Stephanie Benato, thank you. I agree with board members Bichette and Bienvenue. I am deeply concerned about the demolition by neglect. Not only would you shore up walls if you were taking away particularly the cross beams or they had been destroyed by fire, but you would also have temporary box that is, framing it to put in the windows. Because how would you expect Adobe that might be several courses above that opening to stay up all by itself? I mean, it's just really common sense that something had to hold that up. And without any photos to document it, always going to the wrong person, nobody ever saying go to historic. I find that loss of the house a lot, but I do see like part of that one wall is up. You can see where the openings are. That might be enough to continue that as a contributing status. I think we know what the building looked like, and I think the footprint is still probably somewhat visible on the ground. So I think those kinds of things could speak to keeping it as contributing, or maybe just to even in a sense, you have to be within the law, but you would be, but also just to say it's really not okay to do demolition by neglect and then come in and ask for forgiveness. And even with the exception, if it ever comes back for that, then what's the hardship? Did you create the hardship yourself? Because again, if you create the hardship, then how can you really call it a hardship? I mean, so that's like allowing demolition by neglect. Anyway, thank you very much.
Anyone else on Zoom?
Chair Rios, no other people on Zoom would like to speak. I just would want to make one quick point that if it is the pleasure of this board, ultimately that everything needs to be removed from the site in order to do whatever reconstruction there might be. This is in the downtown archaeological review district as well. And so there would need to be an archaeological investigation, just as an FYI.
Thank you. And did you say there was someone else wishing to speak?
No, I'm sorry, Chair Rios, nobody.
Okay. Board members, it is appropriate at this time to make a motion. Member Benvenue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Before making the motion, I'll just make a comment that I am going to move that the contributing status be maintained, but I am not necessarily taking the position that demolition is a foregone conclusion in this case. That still remains to be determined. And even if demolition were allowed in whole or in part, that could be conditioned on reconstruction in kind, which the code does specifically provide for in an instance like this. So with that said, case 2023-006954 HDRB 57878 West San Francisco Street, for the reasons stated during our discussion, I would move that the board maintain the status of this structure as contributing.
Is there a second?
Beach, I will second, and I might just add as a friendly amendment that the yard wall status remains contributing as well.
Accepted.
Roll call vote, please.
Member Mather?
To maintain status.
Yes.
She votes
Yes.
in the affirmative.
Yes.
Thank you. Member Aguilar Medrano?
Yes.
Member Beachite?
Yes.
Member Bienvenue?
Yes.
Motion has been approved.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. And we'll see you again, I'm sure. Next case is Ramon's case, and it's located at 529 East Palace. Is the applicant here? The applicants are here.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board. This is a case that some of you may be familiar with because it was brought to us on May 23rd for a status review and determination of primary facade. The location is just east of the intersection of Armijo Street and East Palace Avenue. The applicant now proposes demolition of the existing north wood deck and stairs, proposed renovation of the north porch and portal, infill of a second-story exterior door, and a new 18 by 24-inch awning window to the north of the second-story portal, west of the existing window. Also a new brick patio. The Wheeling House is a single-family residence listed as contributing to the downtown and east side historic district. Architectural style is side gabled with craftsman elements. The core of the house is likely constructed before 1910, with several additions to it since 1973. The structure sits on a raised glazed brick foundation that encloses a basement, and the additions are frame and faced with rustic wood shingles, giving them a Bay tradition appearance. This is the facade that the north facade that was not considered primary, where that's kind of that's where the work is going to be taking place. Another view of the same facade. Again, from the northwest corner. This is a portion of the west facade that was considered primary, with the exclusion of the stained glass windows, which were not considered historic, or the dormers. This is the facade diagram. It shows you the primary facades that were designated F1, F2, and F10. The existing site plan is on the left, and the proposed site plan is on the right. Floor plan showing where the work is taking place. The existing is on the left, and the proposed is on the right. The west elevation existing above and the proposed below. Staff recommends approval of the proposed project and finds that the application complies with section 14-5.2D, general design standards for all historic districts, and 14-5.2E, downtown and east side design standards. And with that, I will stand for any questions.
Or there's any clarification questions for the applicant? None at this time. So applicant or applicants, please come forward and get sworn in.
Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Scott Cherry, 2351 Fox Road, Santa Fe, New Mexico, 87507.
Good evening, Mr. Cherry. What do you have to tell us?
Thank you.
further?
Yeah, the proposed portal, we just tried to design in a way that would fit in with the house, but not try and mimic a fake sense of history. We think it's really a special, important house. And the deck that we're removing, as you can see from the existing drawing, that was from a scan, a LiDAR scan. So it's fairly dilapidated. The stairs have already been removed. They were removed with a previous permit. So there's a little bit of a clarification to make there, but yeah, we felt like it was very respectful design to bring forward for the house.
And all of this is not publicly visible, correct? It's
Not-
all done in the back of the house.
Yeah, no, it's all done in the back of the house.
Yeah.
And if you see the facades on the, I don't know if you can bring up the facade diagram again. It's on F5 is where, and I would say F6 and F7. So it does not, it's not only is it not publicly visible, but none of the work will abut any contributing or primary facades, I should say.
Any questions for the applicant? Member Beechey?
Just one. Yeah, I agree. That's a really deliberately symmetrical solution to something that was there, and I appreciate that. And it affects the west and east facades as well. Is there a mistake on the east existing facade? It looks like the proposed shows a window, but the existing does not. There's not a window being added.
There is a window being added.
Oh, there is. Okay.
That's in the,
Is that in the primary portion of the facade?
no, it's on F5.
I'm sorry, I was looking at, it's on the
It's actually in the photos.
on the east facade?
You want to see the drawing?
Just the facades.
Yeah, so that's the proposed on the right, and the existing on the left.
Sorry, it's the east facades, existing and proposed. Herman. It was the last slide you showed.
Yeah, the work's being proposed on the north facade.
Right.
So,
There, that one. Yeah.
oh, I think yeah, that'd be an error. The window on the proposed east elevation is existing.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Just wanted to clarify that. Thanks.
Any other questions, board members? None. Anyone from the public wishing to comment? No one. Anyone on Zoom?
Chair Rios, no.
Thank you. A motion is in order. Member Aguilar-Madrón.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it's really nice design and that it will be a great improvement to the house. I remember I was on the site visit when we did the status review, and I think this is going to clean it up and simplify that facade a lot. So I think you guys did a nice job. So in case number 2022-006968 HDRB at 529 East Palace Avenue, I move to approve the application as submitted. And maybe just note that the existing window on the east facade is remaining in place. That is just not shown on the drawing.
Is there a second to this motion? And is there
Each
anything
side
further
seconds.
to add? Nothing further? Roll call vote. please.
Member Aguilar Madrano,
Yes.
member Beachside,
Yes.
member Bienvenue,
Yes.
member Mather.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you very much and good luck with your project.
Thank you.
The last case for this evening is located at 425 Apodaca Hill. This is Heather's case. Heather, and is the applicant here? I'm going to guess this.
Chair Rios, Mr. Purvis is not present tonight, but John Murphy is present via Zoom. So he'll be representing the applicants as well as the owner. My apologies. Okay, this case has reference to do, it is a status review for 425 Apodaca Hill, which is located in the downtown and east side historic district. Apodaca Hill was originally called portion of Canyon Road, but as time went on and as that area was developed, it was renamed as Apodaca Hill. The area that is highlighted in sort of the light yellow color is the site itself, which is located to the south of Canyon Road and to the east of Camino Cabra. So with reference to the Hickey and the evolution of the home, you can see in the upper right, a 1948 aerial, and it's circled in red. And it's a little difficult to make out the footprint of the building, but it definitely is not the footprint that is there today. In the 1960 aerial, the applicant actually pulled in a floor plan, which is illustrated to the left here. And it shows that that footprint was extant in 1960. Additionally, in the Higbee, proposed Higbee, the supposition is that the older portion of the house is outlined in orange. And the newest portion of the house is outlined in green, somewhere in between on the east elevation, and maybe Mr. Murphy can clarify this, was the addition as well on the south side of that original structure. And if you see the sort of dimension of the adobe walls, especially on that west elevation, you can see the walls are thinner, and the like, so that you sort of can see the evolution of the house through the footprint and the size of the walls. These are photographs of the existing house. It is in rough shape. The applicant will be returning to you for some additional work. So the purpose of this status review is to determine the path forward. The house has evolved over time. As families change and grow, there's the need for adding bedrooms and such. In the 1980s, portions of the house were completely rebuilt, as noted by the owner or the person who lived in the house. And then also in the 1990s, windows were replaced to the sort of metal slider windows, and it was through a grant that provided by what was then a different company name, but is now HomeWise. You can see the window replacements. The house itself has a real model type of a adobe feel. The structure is of adobe, and you can see that the parapets are, not cantilevered, but it has the characteristics, not uniform wall surface, as well as the curved parapets. And this is the east side, or the east elevation, where the bathroom is currently. And so with recommendation for staff, a contributing structure, the definition is that it's 50 years old. This house was built in the 1930s, so it does qualify for that. It establishes or maintains the character of the historic district, while the house's footprint does maintain character. A lot of changes have occurred over time. And so the current structure is questionable as whether it maintains the character of the historic district. It adds to historic associations, and those associations would be with residents and the history of Santa Fe generally. And then the historic architectural design qualities are significant for the district. And with the changes that have occurred on the home over time, those historic architectural design qualities have been removed. So it does not meet all criteria for a contributing structure. And so therefore staff recommends that the structure be designated as non-contributing. This is the 1957 map illustrating the Apodaca Hill development. And I thought it might be interesting to you to see that the lots on the eastern side were larger in nature. And probably a lot of that had to do with farming, as well as with the overall development of the family compounds, as it were, the family expansion that would be on the south side, where a lot of those buildings that are there are somewhat related in terms of families as well. And that concludes the staff presentation.
Thank you, Heather. Would you agree that much of this building is still historic in terms of its footprint, excluding the 1980s portion?
Cherios, I would agree that much of the footprint is historic, considering that the last additions were in present in 1960, which qualifies for that. Even with those changes up to 1960, qualifies as 50 years old.
Thank you.
Or greater.
Any other questions or comments at this time? Member Benvenu?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I'll just put my cards on the table right up front so we all know where we stand. I just couldn't part ways more strongly on this case than on the staff recommendation. I mean, to me, this is a quintessential example of a structure that contributes to this district. It's a vernacular building. It's been the same family for 6 generations, was built on site. It's all adobe. It was added to over a 20-year period, which is the classic pattern of these residences in this area. All of the massing is retained. It's exactly the kind of building, even from the street, that, you know, people in the 20s came to Santa Fe to paint. And, you know, that's literally, it looks exactly like what you would see in, you know, a Jesse Nussbaum photo or a William Penhallow Henderson painting all over the east side. And they're disappearing. And to me, this is something that just should be preserved at all costs as it is. I think that the minor alterations are just that, minor. It's mainly the windows. It seems it's the type of windows, and apparently they were somewhat widened, possibly. I don't think that affects the historic integrity of this building. And certainly the re-roofing does not affect the integrity of the structure. And I see no other alterations within the last 50 years that do anything to change that historic integrity, which is just so strong. This is literally the type of building that Santa Fe style is intended to emulate. And it would just be an utter shame to me to take a real Santa Fe building and replace it with something that was an imitation of that. So that's my spiel. My question would be, if it were contributing, what would staff's position be as to the primary facades?
Chair Rios, Member Bienvenu. It is the opinion of staff that the west facade of the original footprint, so where the door is currently located, one of the doors, would be primary, as well as the west facade that is closer to Apodaca Hill Road.
The west facade is what fronts on Apodaca Hill Road. And what was the other one that you
The
said?
entire west facade. There is a piece that is that faces to the north along that facade. And so you can see it in these photographs. So this is the northernmost portion of the west facade. And then this is the westernmost portion of the west facade. I'm sorry, southernmost portion of the west facade.
We can go over this again, but just for my own benefit right now, could you just repeat one more time what staff would recommend as the primary facades if the board were to determine it was a contributing structure?
Staff would recommend the primary facades would be the entire west facade, excluding that north facing portion, which is technically a north facade. So the entire front of the house.
Okay. Appreciate that. The only other comment I was going to make is also the condition. And I do get from the site visit and the report that it is in, as you just said, rough condition. There's no doubt about that. But, you know, to me, that's not part of the contributing status determination, because that really goes to historic integrity, not structural integrity. And that would be something that, of course, could be talked about at a later date, even if it were a contributing building or non, for that matter. But I don't think that directly relates to the status determination at this time. Thank you.
And I just want to make a quick comment in reference to buildings that come before this board that are in rough conditions. We recently, as a matter of fact, recognized a building that was a vernacular style building that was in rough condition that many people would probably want to demolish. And the owners decided to refurbish the building, remodel the building, and So they were recognized at our awards banquet. And they showed the inside of the building, and man, it was just gutted. And you would think many people that would see something such as that building would probably say, oh God, the road that I would have taken would be to demolish this thing and start from scratch. And these particular owners decided not to do that. And now they have a beautiful home that they are loving to live in. Anyway, and there have been other buildings that come to mind that were in this type or even worse condition that have been remodeled and refurbished. Just as an aside, that a comment that I wanted to make. Member Beecham?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have some comments, but should we hear from the applicant first, or I can also express my opinion now? Go for it. Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, I just, let's see. I appreciate that the applicant obtained a new HICP report. That's not always a requirement. It's very helpful to have. And I think that that sort of evidences the importance that the family places on its history. And I mean, the history of the building probably couldn't be of any more utmost importance than to the family, but they chose to seek an independent review of the historical significance for our benefit. I think that despite its history, the HICP recommends it be non-contributing. It references its deteriorated state, which must be disappointing for the owner to see a house that's been in generations of the family come to this point, and to want to improve it is admirable. In these cases, I find that I tend to want to see what the owner and the family wants for the property's future. And I believe that the maintenance of the vernacular style, which I appreciate, is best achieved by some degree of flexibility, which a non-contributing status would provide. So I think if we want to support the vernacular construction in this neighborhood, that we should allow for that to be expressed without a lot of constraints that would be, that can be worked around as by exception to a contributing status, but are more supported by a non-contributing status. So I agree with staff's recommendation.
Are other board members wishing to say anything at this point? No. I'd like to swear in the applicant or applicants. Please come forward.
And Mr. Murphy, if you would like to speak, please raise your hand. Otherwise, I won't pick on you.
Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the governing body. My name is Paul Babcock. I live at 423B Apodaca Hill. I am the sixth generation of the Apodaca heirs living on Apodaca Hill. My mother was an heir of Apodaca. This house, 425, was my grandmother's and my grandfather's house. I currently literally was born and raised across the driveway from my grandmother's house, 425 Apodaca Hill. Only wife and my family were able to build a house at 423B Apodaca Hill, just right down the driveway. The intent of this house was not for us to even buy it. A year ago, my uncle lived in it and came to me as I was backing out of our driveway and stated that the house was in such bad shape that he was just living in one room, and came to see that he wanted to keep it in the family and to see if we were interested in purchasing the house. At the time, I just retired from the fire department after 31 years and didn't have the funds to do it. Approached my mother-in-law and she said anything to help my grandkids, she would invest in the property. So that's why my mother-in-law's name's on the property, myself and my wife. I've been in Apodaca Hill and there's only 6 families: the Apodacas, the Armijos, the Gonzaleses, the Valdeses, and the Riveras. And it's sad to say that many of these families I just mentioned have moved out because either they couldn't afford the property or whatever their reason was. I have 3 boys. I want my boys to be able to live and raise their families where they were raised, just like I was given that opportunity. The house is in very bad shape. Like other cases that came upon you and other comments from the public about demolition through neglect, I haven't spent at least $7,000 on silicone Graco style roof material to try to keep that house from collapsing. Just recently, one of the doors collapsed because the internal wall collapsed of Adobe and it crushed the door where we can gain access. And I had to use a crowbar to actually gain access into the house because my wife and I or my children, we open up the roof, the doors or the windows. There's such a mildew smell and moisture content in that building that we were just trying to air it out. The intent of the house is at some point with approval in the process of the board is to try to build my son's house. I'm very fortunate. The current house I live at, 423B Apodaca Hill, house that we have, 425, my grandmother's and my grandfather's house, and then a lower lot we want to leave for our children and keep our heritage and our Apodaca heirs on Apodaca Hill. I'm invested in Apodaca Hill, as I mentioned about being with the fire department as the fire chief for the last 4 years of my 31 career. I don't mention that to influence the board. I mention that to tell the board I am committed to Apodaca Hill. I'm committed to this community. That's for the only reason I mentioned those years of commitment to this town and to Apodaca Hill, and I want the same for my family. I have seen many individuals from the ages 20 to 35 go get educated and then take their services that were born and raised in Santa Fe to other parts of the state because they can't do that. I have a boy in college that's about to graduate next year. My other boy is about to enter college. I want them to get educated and bring their services back to Santa Fe and live and raised where they were born. And I stand for any questions. I forgot to talk briefly, if I may, Madam Chair, about the remodel that I was part of with my family, my cousins and my uncles in 1980s and 1990s, because that roof did collapse. That house does not have a foundation. It's river rock and cement. It's not rebar reinforced is what I mean by not having a foundation. And we just want what's an eyesore now, as hard as it is. Like I said, this is my grandmother's house. They took care of me when my parents went to work and I wasn't in school at the time. I have a lot of history in the house, and I understand about people's concern. This is what Santa Fe was like and the historic status of it. It's very hard for me to decide to come in front of you and say, I'd like to change this altogether. I'd like to make changes where my family could raise their own family in the place they were raised like I was. So I stand for any questions.
First of all, I want to say I am so glad that you are here, the owner. I like for the owners to come before the board so that you just told me a lot about that particular house, the history of the house, and what you want to continue to have the home in your family. That, to me, being a native Santa Fe means a lot to me. And I think that we, not to try to exclude other members, but we native Santa Feans belong to a certain group that understand these things just a little more deeply than others, perhaps. I was born in the house that I'm living in right now. So I have deep roots there as well. And I could tell by your presentation that you earnestly want to make something out of this home where your children can continue living there.
That is the truth, Madam Chair.
So I do appreciate your comments, and I'm glad that you came before the board instead of sending another representative.
Thank you.
Likewise, for the gentleman that came whose house burnt down, I appreciated hearing his comments as well, because he told his story from his viewpoint. So thank you. And let's hear from other members to see what they have to say. Anybody wishing to make any comments? Haven't already been made? Not at this time. Anyone from the audience wishing to make any comments in reference to this case, or no one? Anyone on Zoom?
Chair Rios, yes. First, I would like to ask John Murphy. I saw the hand go up and down a little bit, so I'm going to allow you to talk. If you have anything to say.
Yes, hello, Madam Chair.
I'll need to go ahead and swear you in. Do
Yes.
you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
John W. Murphy, 2833 Plaza Verde, Santa Fe, New Mexico, 87507. There's nothing much more I can add to Mr. Babcock's presentation. I think what he is putting forth is what I assume, and I'm not usually in this role, it's an architect who is in this role, is the current limitations of the house based on its deteriorated condition. Just to back up, when I made the evaluation and came to the recommendation of non-contributing, this is more about that it was a vernacular box that didn't show any real kind of articulation of, I would say, the Pueblo Revival style. And I understand that is a limitation of the ordinance, but we have to use that framework to move forward. So what struck me most, and I agree that the footprint has been in place and it's very rooted to the land, very simplistic, was the replacement of the windows and what appeared to be the enlargement of the openings to hold those sliding units. So that would be the most denigrating aspect of changes today. However, I think that the condition of the house should be taken into consideration. It's not just about aesthetic appearances. So when I looked at this a couple of years ago and then sent reluctantly my surveyor into the house to look at the damage, it was fairly significant. And again, I realize that's not your lens to look through, but this is a reality that will affect the applicant moving forward. So what I observed was, collapsed ceilings, perhaps the roof structure, walls that had sloughed down to the floor. The floor itself was rotted in certain areas. So there is some pretty significant damage to the structure. I do agree that the house communicates the Valdez's history, as he said, of one of the 6 families that kind of settled Apodaca Hill. And it does have that importance, but maybe more important is keeping the family on the land. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think mine's more, of a personal sentiment, just echoing what Madam Chair said. I think it's so important what you're doing and that this isn't the house you were living in, but you were given the opportunity to purchase the house in hopes of restoring it and keeping it in the family. Like you mentioned, I'm one of those people, I left for college, but I came back and it's tough, especially on the east side. And I think keeping, our local families and allowing them to live on the east side is so important, and it's becoming so difficult to do. So I think what you're doing for your sons is really valuable, and I think it's exciting. I come from a family where we have photos of my husband's grandpa on Canyon Road when it was still dirt, and I wish we'd had that same opportunity to keep those houses in our family. So while I do agree with Member Bienvenu that I think the building warrants, is contributing. There's a lot there. I don't want to be prohibitive in what you can do with it. And so I would agree with staff's recommendation and John Murphy that keeping it in the family in this case is the most important thing as I see it. So I would agree with staff's report.
Chair Rios, just one thing, Stephanie Beninato would also like to speak.
Oh, okay. And she's been sworn in?
She's been previously sworn, she may unmute.
Thank you very much. I actually agree with Member Bienvenu. I think that this should be contributing. To pretend that it'll retain its vernacular character if you make it non-contributing, I think is just a false premise. These sons are in college, not in college yet. You actually don't know if they want to live there. One would think they would. And but it is already in the family. And I would hope that, you know, it sounds like the sentiment is to go to non-contributing, but I think that those two facades could be maintained. And then the rest of the structure could be demolished or gutted or whatever needs to happen. I also think that there's lack of historical understanding when you say there's no real foundation, because rock foundation, that is cobble foundations, are very good foundations, especially for adobes, because they will help keep moisture out of the adobe and take it out if it somehow gets wet. I have personal experience with that. So to say that's not really a foundation is just historically inaccurate. And again, I don't think that is something to say about the condition. Yes, the condition definitely is rough, but could those two facades be preserved? Thank you.
Anyone else?
Chair Rios, no.
Board members, I believe the motion is appropriate at this time, and I will entertain one. Oh, yes, absolutely.
Madam Chair, this is one of my sons.
Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
I'm Tyler Babcock and my address is 423-B Apodaca Hill. Madam Chair, members of the board, I grew up in the house my parents built right down the driveway. And so I gotta grow up going to my grandma's house and spend time with my family. And that's just really significant to me as a Santa Fe local, because as you said, the significance of family and being, you know, a local Santa Fean means a lot to me. And it was really hard seeing my uncle have to go because he couldn't afford to keep up the house. And so I feel very fortunate and grateful for my parents giving us this opportunity for, you know, hopefully my grandkids and my brothers to come back, go down the driveway and visit them just like I got to on the way to school every morning. And so my intentions, just to clarify, are to, you know, I do want to get education. My dad didn't have that opportunity. So he gave me the opportunity of private school and worked 31 years so he could afford to do that for me and my two other brothers. So I intend to come back here, stay here, you know, work here, be a part of the community, because there's nothing like the bond I've already been provided through just the name and the family and everybody who surrounds our neighborhood. So I'm so grateful already just to be given such an opportunity of not free property, but, you know, have family roots and well-established stuff. I got to hear about the beams and just the history of the property, the photos, seeing my dad and my cousins and distant relatives all work on that house, and people who I didn't get to meet because, you know, they passed away. So, yeah, just to clarify my intentions, I intend to stay, and I think going to be the same for my brothers. We're very attached to our community and we're passionate about Santa Fe, New Mexico. And we hope to, you know, keep our roots here and dig deeper and deeper with that. So thank you.
Thank you very much, young man, for your comments. I appreciate it. Member Aguilar Madrona?
Are we ready for motion?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for speaking. I loved hearing your perspective. You are so well spoken. I truly do hope you come back. You will be a valuable asset to Santa Fe you already are, but even more so when you come back. So in case number 2023-007020 HDRB at 425 Apodaca Hill, I move to approve the application as submitted and maintain the status as non-contributing to align with staff's recommendation.
Beachside will second.
May we have a roll call vote, please?
Member Beachside?
Yes.
Member Bienvenue?
No.
Member Mather?
Yes. Yes.
Member Aguilar Medrano?
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you very much and good luck with your project.
Thank you very much.
All righty. Anything under discussion items, Heather?
Yes, Chair Rios, thank you. So one of the things that has been arising lately is a discussion of outdoor dining. And we certainly with with COVID allowed for more flexible standards relative to outdoor dining. And to enable those businesses to continue during a rough time. So at that time, the board considered something that would be consistent across the historic districts. I spoke with Nicole Thomas, and she was the one that shared with me the conversation at that board meeting. And the idea being that it would be wrought iron or some sort of consistent material across the district. So as you know, even close to City Hall here, there are businesses that have Jersey barriers up surrounding their outdoor dining areas. And so we thought it might be beneficial to get some feedback from the board as to the type and the style that would be considered acceptable for those outdoor dining areas. Because we will need to memorialize them as they continue to exist. And there is a leasing provision through the city. But before we do anything to continue that, we want to assure that those outdoor dining areas are compatible with the character and, you know, will contribute to the historic district as a whole.
And did you want those comments?
Yes, as
Now,
a
or-
little bit of a feedback, informational, and then we can draft some standards and bring that forward as,
And discuss that at a future date?
yes, that is correct.
Member Aguilar, Medrano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Maybe a question for you, Heather. So I know some of these spaces right now occur in like parking spaces, parallel parking spaces, for instance. Is there a safety code requirement that requires the barrier be solid or consistent? Like, for instance, if we said a series of planters could make that barrier, would that be acceptable? Or is there something code-wise about it being solid or a minimum opening size?
Chair Rios, Member Aguilar Medrano, right now, there's nothing, it's not really contemplated in our code because it's within right of way. And typically there are no structures within the right of way with the exception of medians and sidewalks is considered a structure. But, and so this is sort of new ground. Safety is a consideration, but as of yet, I have not heard from the Public Works Director that much more is needed other than a wrought iron or some sort of fencing so that that has a consistent look. The certainly there is liability that the restaurant owners do take on as a result of that if there were to be an accident. Another thing that's been contemplated is possibly closing down some streets, similar to what's happened and has been in place with the western portion of the plaza where the Plaza Cafe is. But that's another one that has recently been expanded that was not done with any permit per se. And so I think it's the time is, you know, now to act and to provide direction.
Because I'm thinking if some of these restaurants serve alcohol in these spaces, which I don't know if they're allowed to do or what they are, that might provide some guidance on what kind, if they're serving alcohol, then I think that's gonna also not limit, but dictate what we can approve. Like in that instance, I don't think a series of planters, for instance, would be acceptable. I think it has to be a consistent barrier. No thoughts on what it should look like yet, just throwing out some questions.
Well, I'm wondering if these spaces, this outdoor dining spaces are actually legally dedicated to such.
Arios, their structure for it is now is a lease. So they're not dedicated as one would say, adding on to the property, to that particular property so that it is a fee simple type of scenario. It's still within public right of way. So the structure is a lease.
Okay, because it seems like a lot of these places, you used to have cars going through there and now they're dedicated to dining out.
Yes, Chair Reeves, that's correct. And it's a challenge because ultimately we'll have to be permitted through Public Works. But as of this time, it would be good to get some feedback from the board as to what is felt to be appropriate, because there are wooden fences in the historic district, there's wrought iron in the historic district. Certainly much of our town has, or our downtown has changed over time. And so, just thinking of the plaza, there's been wooden fences and wrought iron fences and like. So what would be the direction of this board or the thoughts of this board? We can study it further, but I just wanted to get some impression.
Any comments from this other side?
Thank you. Yeah, just a question. I mean, do we have to have a fence? I mean, is there an option where a restaurant could place tables outside their business in the street or the sidewalk without a barrier?
Cheerios, Member Beachide, there are a lot of restaurants that have something like immediately adjacent to the wall of their restaurant. Just think of Tres Colotas across the street. And they have some, that's all been permitted. They have some in that area on the other side of the sidewalk. So, but that's not in the public right of way. So within the right of way, like at La Boca, there's the danger of a car running into them, for instance. And so that would be sort of a different scenario than first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm just trying to get clear on what is being asked of the board at this point. You're just looking for a little feedback as to what our concerns or suggestions might be.
Cheerios, Member Bienvenu, that is correct.
Okay. And the purview of the board would be strictly over the appearance, right?
Cheerios, Member Bienvenu, that is correct.
Okay. And would there be any reason for the board to want to have any standards that apply to these parklets or whatever we're going to call them that would be different than the general standards we already have in the ordinance?
Cheerios, Member Bienvenu, I can't imagine there would be no reason, but I need to look at the code. I think there's some, within the character of the streetscape would be definitely a consideration. So what do you define the character of the streetscape? It's not like height where it would go 600 feet one way, 600, because that's the entire downtown. So, it would be, yes, style, but as to materials, would the board entertain coyote fencing, for instance, that's
Right.
permitted in the downtown east side?
So are you envisioning some possible set of standards that would apply to all of, what are we calling these, by the way?
Outdoor dining area?
Okay, that would apply to all outdoor dining areas, so there'd be a consistent set of standards, and then the individual that received a permit for that would not have to come before us for approval of their design? Is that the concept? To avoid that step?
Cheerios, Member Bienvenu, I think they would have to come to you anyway, because it is a structure in the downtown East Side Historic District. But, as to be able to provide some direction to applicants about what might be approved materials would be helpful.
I can see that, but it seems to me that it would be the same question as if some downtown business wanted to put a trellis out in front. They'd come before us and we'd decide if we thought it was harmonious. It would depend on what street it was on, for example, what the building was. And if someone wanted to put in a metal fence, they would come before us and we would decide that. Someone wanted to do a portal, we would look at it. It seems to me that anything that would be being built for this purpose would just be kind of the same thing that already comes before us on a case by case basis.
So let me just sort of do the inverse and thinking of a specific type of material like the Jersey barriers that we have been seeing going up on active streets. What would be the feelings of the board to have those as a possible solution?
What were they again?
The Jersey, the concrete barriers.
That would be a no for
Yes.
me. Prohibit those.
So that's what we have right now, don't we, on Marcy?
Yes.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah, that to me is the question is, why are they still there? I suppose.
They are not.
I mean, I could kind of
attractive
understand
at
that we
all.
had a global catastrophe emergency and everything was up for grabs for a little while, but we're long past that now.
Chair Rios, Member Benvenu, that's why the city is really trying to take this on.
Right. I'm happy to go any way you want to suggest to us. It just seems to me it would be as difficult to put together a set of standards to govern all of these possibilities as it would be for a building, because they're little buildings basically. And so I'm just not sure if we can, unless it was a one size fits all solution and we were just saying, this is the design we approve in advance and anyone can do this. But even that I think would be almost impossible because every street's a little different.
Yeah, Chair Rios, Member Benvenu, what was communicated to me was wrought iron was the material of choice. And you make a very good point in that each streetscape is very distinct and unusual. But so it's not necessarily that we would need a whole set of standards, but maybe as policy, we can say that Jersey barriers or the concrete barriers are not a historic material. And we can say, or not found in the historic Santa Fe character.
Right.
So, certainly by taking that avenue and just leaving it open to the downtown and east side historic district standards might be a path that we could take.
Yeah, I get that. Makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I have a thought, not so much about material, but about how open that material is. I think being able to see people dining and then being able to, people watch outside, I think that livens the street. And if, for instance, there was a solid coyote fence or a solid sheet of metal with, laser cut design out of it, I think we would miss that aspect of it. So I think more so the materials, I would lean towards maybe having a requirement similar to like we do for vehicular gates, where we require a certain percentage of it be open. That would be something I would be interested in, I think.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is there any thought about cost for the restaurants? Or is that not a consideration? I know that these things are not cheap and I worry about them slightly, but maybe that's not a concern.
I think the viewpoint is we're trying to improve the aesthetics as opposed to these barriers, and just trying to give some kind of input to make these outdoor dining spaces look better and be more, and actually they would be actually more inviting.
And we'd also, because we're essentially extending the amount of customers they can have.
Right.
So it'd be
Because they have
increasing
indoor and outdoor.
Yeah, it's increasing their footprint. So while there would be an associated cost, maybe it's offset by the fact that they're now getting X number more tables.
Anything else?
I'll have one more comment. Thank you, Madam Chair. So I do think, again, coming back to the specifics of the location, I mean, if I were going to have a policy about this, I personally think it's important to, this is essentially something that's not actually attached, but a part of an existing building. So anyone that's putting one of these out in front of their restaurant is essentially extending that building out into the street. So I think it's important that it be harmonious and consistent with the particular building it's being, again, not attached, but associated with. And that can vary, again, quite tremendously. It might be a brick building in some places, and it could be the Catron block on the other side if someone opened up a restaurant over there, which would be very different than one of the old Woolworths or whatever. I think it should be sensitive to not just the streetscape, but the particular building. I think that's important because, again, because especially since coming back to cost, there are a lot of off-the-shelf solutions to these because they're common all over the world in essence. And I think they're hugely successful and desirable. I think it's the vast vastly contributes to a city's vitality to have those. So I'm all in favor of them. But I would be very leery of people just thinking, oh, I can just buy this thing that's a structure and stick it out in front, that would have no sensitivity at all to again, to the building or the street. So that would be of concern to me. I think they almost have to be custom built to comply with, again, back to our ordinance. My thought.
Board members for your comments. I think they've all been very thoughtful.
Yeah, I would just,
Yeah.
can I just say, I would echo, and agree with all the comments that have been made. Like, I think maybe our focus should be on preserving what's special about downtown and enhancing that, not detracting from that with additional walls. I mean, we might consider these like mini plazas, like spaces that bring people together, that to enjoy the buildings and keep those sort of philosophies in mind when we review these things. But I agree with the fenestration. That's a really good point. Like being able to see the buildings and not changing the views so drastically on streets that they become like just walled off patios. Maybe just those sorts of guidelines would be enough in addition to our current code.
Yes.
Comment with the fenestration also, I think we should have maximum height because I think it should be considered as something completely different than a fence. Because that's part of keeping the streetscape open is that the only thing that works about those concrete barriers right now is that they're low enough that you still have that interaction between the two spaces. So that might be my only other recommendation for setting from the get-go as a max height, and then they come to the board for approval of the style.
Chair Rios, member Aguilar Medrano. So the code references if there's no walls in the streetscape, which I'm thinking about Lincoln here, then the maximum height is 5 feet. So would we be looking for something more like 3 feet or something akin to that? Okay, thank you.
All righty. Any matters from the board? Okay, no matters from the board. Okay, our next meeting is July 25th, and we're back to Tuesday. And I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Do I hear a second?
So moved.
Aguilar Medrano seconds.
And roll call vote, please.
Member Bienvenu,
Yes.
Member Mather,
Yes.
Member Aguilar Medrano,
Yes.
Member Beachy.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.